Hi guys, sorry it took me more than a month to launch part 2 of my property journey as I was recently away on a road trip at Tasmania, sharing with you some scenes I took on the road. Okay, coming back to reality. So in the previous video, I shared why I ended up buying an executive condo as my first property. Fast forward a few years, my place at River Cove Residences will soon obtain MOP in October this year, and we are really excited to plan for our next move. However, it is also very important to make sure we evaluate our options properly so that we are well positioned to make our next pot of gold while not overstretching ourselves too much. Hence, in this video, I'll be going through a detailed explanation of the financial breakdown as well as the pros and cons of the various options I can potentially consider. Doesn't matter if you're an existing EC, HDB or private property owner, if you're planning for your next move, do stay tuned for the entire video so that you can make a more informed decision. Alright, let's go! There are three main options I can consider. Number 1, decoupling. Number 2, selling my existing EC to buy another property. And number 3, selling my existing EC to buy 2 other properties. I'm sure you have heard of these options before, but I can't emphasize enough the importance of the planning and execution of each option. Let me warn you first, the next few minutes can be a bit boring with all the numbers, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Let's look at option 1, decoupling. Assuming your existing property is currently held by 2 owners, husband and wife for example. Basically, what decoupling aims to achieve is to remove one name from the property so as to free up his or her name to buy a second property without incurring ABSD. Now, this is only applicable for EC or private property owners. You are not able to remove an existing owner from the HDB unless due to special circumstances. So here are the calculations I usually do for my clients to evaluate whether decoupling is even a feasible option. Assuming the property is currently valued at 1.5 million and both of you have a 50-50 ownership. In this example, the wife is buying over the 50% share from the husband. By doing so, she needs to pay him 750k to buy out his share. But where is this 750k coming from? The usual rules apply, that is, minimally 25% down payment plus a max of 75% loan, which means the wife has to take on a new loan of 75% of the 750k, which works out to be 562,500. On top of that, she has to take on 50% of the existing loan of 600k for example, which works out to be 300k. Taking A plus B, we can see that the total loan the wife will eventually take on adds up to be 862,500. So the first hurdle we need to cross is to make sure that based on the wife's income, other debt obligation and age, her max loan is more than enough to cover the 862,500 we calculated earlier. The second hurdle to cross is to make sure that the wife has sufficient funds to pay for the 25% down payment, stamp duties and legal fees involved, which adds up to be about 210k in this example. If the answer is yes for both, then the wife can quite safely buy over her husband's share. Now, coming over to the husband, let's calculate how much he gets to cash out after selling the 50% share to his wife. Based on the so-called selling price of 750k, we need to less out 50% of the existing loan, and we also need to pay back whatever CPF plus accrued interest he has used for the house so far. Ultimately, he's able to cash out 335k after the decoupling is completed. Now, let's take a look at how much resources he has in total for the purchase of the next house. So this is the amount of cash proceeds we calculated earlier. Add whatever cash savings you intend to use for the next house, and add the amount that is currently in your CPF OA, and add the CPF refund that you are getting back after decoupling. We have a total of 700k for the purchase of the next house. Likewise, we need to calculate what is the maximum loan the husband is able to get under the total debt servicing ratio, which works out to be 1.9 million in this case. Based on the 700k funds plus a max loan of 1.9 million, I can safely say that the husband has a max budget of about 2.4 million for the purchase of the second property. Now, I know all this might sound complicated or even unintuitive to some of you. The calculations also differ depending on your current percentage ownership, be it 50-50 or 99-1. Fret not, feel free to contact me on WhatsApp and I'll be happy to do up a customized plan and explain to you in person. Next up, let's look at option 2, which involves selling your existing house and upgrading to one property only. The calculations here should be more straightforward compared to the decoupling option. So first, let's calculate how much you can potentially cash out from the sale of your existing property. assuming a selling price of 1.5 million, I'll need to less out the full amount of the existing loan, less out the CPF plus accrued interest used by both husband and wife, less out the agent's commission, less out the legal fees. We are looking at a total of about 635k of cash proceeds. So with this amount of cash proceeds, I'll need to add on the amount of combined savings you intend to use for the next house, plus the amount of CPF currently in your OA account, plus the amount of CPF that you are getting back from the refund after the sale of your house. We are looking at a total of about 1.4 million plus for the purchase of the next house, which is a very comfortable and healthy amount for upgrading purposes. Next up, I'll need to look at the combined eligible income based on both your TDSR as well as your income weighted average age in order for me to determine your maximum loan tenure. This works out to be a max loan of 2.95 million. Looking at the total resources of 1.4 million in cash and CPF plus a max loan of 2.95 million, I'm able to derive your maximum purchase price for the next house at 4.17 million after accounting for stamp duties. Of course, I will not advise you to push to the max price because it's important to set aside some funds for rainy days, which I'll touch on later. This merely helps us to set a ceiling for planning purposes. Before we move on to the timeline planning for concurrent sale and purchase, I hope you have learned something useful from the video so far. If so, I would really appreciate if you can help me by clicking on the like button and subscribing to my channel. For that, here are a few photos of my cat you didn't ask for. And of course, if you're looking for your next property and would like to speak to someone that has been there and done that, feel free to reach out to me at 94515625 and I'll be happy to explain further. Alright, back to the video. Coming back to your upgrading journey, it is crucial to ensure that the whole process is as safe, systematic and stress-free as possible. A proper timeline planning allows for a smooth transition from your current house to the next house and helps to safeguard sufficient reserve funds to provide a strong safety net during rainy days. Here's how a carefully planned timeline looks like. In this example, I'm planning for an upgrade into a 4-bedroom resale condo with a budget of $3 million. Notice I didn't max out the purchase price to 4.17 million, even though this is the max price we calculated earlier. The top line here is for the sale process, while the bottom line here is for the purchase. In the interest of time, I wouldn't go through everything, I'll just highlight the key points. The first thing to take note is to ensure that you only put in the 1% deposit after the OTP for the sale of your house has been exercised. This means that there is a binding contract and the buyer of your house isn't able to back out without consequences. In doing so, you will not be incurring ABSD on the next purchase as well. Secondly, you need to make sure you have sufficient cash on hand for the payment of the 5% initial down payment plus stamp duties, as you will not be able to utilize your CPF at this stage and the cash proceeds from the sale of your house is not back yet. Thirdly, the legal completion of the purchase should take place after the CPF refund has been returned to your OA account. Fourthly, it will also be helpful to negotiate for an extension of stay after the completion so that you have sufficient time to renovate your next place. Finally, it is important to make sure you still have enough reserve funds after the entire purchase has been completed. If you are planning to buy a new launch property, the timeline and financial planning will look slightly different too. There are also a lot more intricate details and potential pitfalls that might prevent a proper execution of the above timeline. For example, what if the buyer is unable to give you an extension? Or what if you have already identified the next house to buy but your current house is not sold yet? Or many other kind of unforeseen circumstances. It is therefore important to have someone that is experienced and well-versed to help you to navigate and avoid these potential pitfalls so that you can have a peace of mind in your upgrading journey. Finally, let's look at option 3, which is to sell your existing house to buy 2 other properties, one under the wife's name and one under the husband's name. The selling part is essentially the same as option 2. The only difference is we will now split the calculations between the wife and husband individually. And let's just assume the cash proceeds is split equally amongst the both of them. Let's look at the calculations for the wife first. This means that she'll get a cash proceeds of 317k plus 210k of cash from her own savings plus 100k of CPF from a current OA account plus 115k from the CPF refund. She's looking at a total of 742k for the purchase of the next house. Next, based on the max loan of $1 million, the wife can go to a max of 1.68 million for the purchase of the next property. Following similar calculations, the husband is able to afford a max price of 2.37 million for the purchase of the next house. The good thing about this option is that you have the flexibility to adjust the cash portion between the husband and the wife. For example, if you plan to buy a bigger property under the husband, you can always allocate less of the cash proceeds under the wife and more so under the husband. So if I change this to 200k for example, the husband will end up with more cash, as you can see here, and correspondingly with a higher purchase price. Of course, for this sell one and buy two option, we will have to plan with extra care due to more overlapping timelines and stretched financials. Feel free to take this offline and we can discuss this in greater detail. In summary, here are the pros and cons of the various options I just went through with you. For option 1 on decoupling, there is a greater control of timeline as I can choose to decouple anytime after MOP. I don't need to wait until my house is sold or subject to the timeline requirements of the buyer of my house. By freeing up one name, I also get to own two properties eventually. I'm also able to retain my current property, especially if I believe there is still room for growth. However, by not selling the house means I won't be able to unlock all the full profits from the house, and hence I need to fork out more cash for the next property from my own pocket. I also run the risk of my current property stagnating in value as it gets older. For option 2, the best part is I'm able to afford a higher quantum for my next house with still pretty strong reserve funds left. However, I'll be putting all eggs into one basket with only one property. Finally, for option 3, the good thing is I'm able to unlock the full profits from the sale and reinvest into two other properties with higher growth. However, it's also the most aggressive option with the least room for error. Some of my clients prefer to stagger the purchase of the second property till sometime later when they have built up their finances again. All in all, there's no right or wrong answers. Ultimately, it boils down to your own investment objective and risk tolerance. For myself, I will most likely go for the decoupling route, as I do have the intention of getting a new launch property that is still under construction. This means that if I go for option 2 to sell my existing house and buy the BUC property, I'll need to rent another place in the meantime for 2 to 3 years maybe, which is not so preferred. At the same time, I do not wish to be so overstretched and buy two properties in a short span of time under option 3. Hence, option 1 allows me to continue staying at my current property while waiting for the BUC property to obtain TOP. After which I'm able to move to the brand new property that is under my name, and we can sell our first property that is now fully under my wife's name. This frees up my wife's name for the next property, and we can repeat this process for future moves. However, the decoupling option might not be suitable or feasible for everyone. Do reach out to me via WhatsApp if you're unsure which option is the best for you. As to where exactly I intend to buy next, you may refer to this video where I explain my prediction on where I think the smart money is flowing to in the second half of 2025. The link to the video is in the description below. Feel free to check it out for more elaboration. Long story short, I believe there will be opportunities in the core central region. However, I'm not saying you should blindly buy into any development just because they are within the CCR. Some places like Orchard and the CBD are still short of local organic demand due to the lack of schools and cheaper amenities. In addition, you must know that buying the right property has got a lot more to do than just choosing the right location. Different developments in the same location and even different units within the same development can have very contrasting performance. So if you're keen to find out where I'm looking to buy my next house, feel free to reach out to me as always. Finally, I would like to highlight that most of us only have a few chances to make a move on our property in our lifetime. One wrong move can have a very long-lasting negative impact, but the right move will benefit you and your family greatly. So before undertaking this huge decision, feel free to reach out to me at 9451-5625 to have an in-depth planning and evaluation. Once again, I'm Sean and I'll see you soon.